20,000 paratroops and glidermen dropped into 3 main landing zones. Only a few aircraft were shot down. However, many gliders broke their tow ropes and were lost. Of the 3 attacking formations, it was the British 1st Airborne Division that was charged with securing the operation's main objective, the bridge over the River Rhine at Arnhem. Because of the fear of heavy flak around the town, 1st Airborne had dropped 8 miles away. There was already the risk of losing the element of surprise. But to make matters worse, by a stroke of bad luck, the lost gliders contained nearly all the force's armoured jeeps. Even at this stage, the division was having trouble with its radios. But there was worse to come. Almost immediately, the force ran into the 9th SS Panzer Division and found itself involved in heavy fighting. While the British 1st Airborne Division had landed west of the Rhine Bridge at Arnhem, the American 82nd Airborne had landed near Nijmegen, intending to seize bridges over the River Waal and on the Meuse. Meanwhile, the US 101st Airborne had landed just north of Eindhoven, aiming to secure bridges over nearby canals. At the same time as the airborne attacks, a ground assault, spearheaded by the British 30th Corps, had struck northeast and was aiming to meet up with the airborne formations dropped behind enemy lines. The initial wave of 1st Airborne Division, dropped outside Arnhem, had been blocked by 9th SS Panzer Division at the village of Oosterbeek. Only 500 paratroops of the 2nd Parachute Battalion succeeded in getting into Arnhem. The battalion seized the northern end of the Rhine Bridge, but elements of the 10th SS Panzer Division prevented a crossing, and the battalion was isolated. A second wave of paratroops was dropped at Oosterbeek and attempted to break into Arnhem, but was blocked by the Germans. The Allies tried to airdrop supplies to 1st Airborne, but the target was missed, and the supplies fell into German hands. The 1st Polish Parachute Brigade landed south of the Rhine, meaning to link up with the British, but the Poles were foiled by a strong German defence. There was still no sign of the Allied ground forces supposed to link up with 1st Airborne. On the 21st of September, the British force holding the northern end of the bridge at Arnhem surrendered. It had lost half its men. 4 days later, 2,000 survivors of the 1st Airborne Division's battle at Oosterbeek withdrew back across the Rhine, leaving Arnhem to the Germans. Although Operation Market Garden had failed in its main objective to capture a bridge over the Rhine, there had been some success elsewhere. 30th Corps had relieved the American 101st Airborne at Wegel, and the next day had pushed on to meet 82nd Airborne south of Nijmegen. After hard fighting, and in spite of fierce German counterattacks, the 82nd had succeeded in capturing the Waal Bridge. For General Eisenhower, in spite of the success of some of the airborne forces, the failure of Market Garden to deliver the promised Rhine crossing proved the folly of a narrow front attack. As for Montgomery, his reputation had suffered a severe blow, and he would never regain his former influence with the Supreme Commander. By the early autumn of 1944, the industrial might of the United States had given the Allies overwhelming superiority over their German enemies. The Western Allies could muster 14,000 planes and over 2,000 tanks on the Western Front. On the ground, 56 divisions were organized into 3 massive army groups behind a front 500 miles long. As well as their overwhelming superiority on the ground, the Allies also outnumbered the Germans by 25 to 1 in aircraft. Both the British Royal Air Force and the American Army Air Force had large numbers of ground attack planes, organized into tactical units. Fighter bombers such as the British Hawker Typhoon and the American P-47 Thunderbolt operated in close support of every Allied ground operation. When the weather allowed, large numbers roamed behind German lines, pouncing on anything that moved, and almost completely depriving the Germans of daytime mobility. Meanwhile, Allied motor transport and armour could mass behind the front with little fear of disruption. General Eisenhower's 3 army groups were the 21st, 12th and 6th. The 21st Army Group was commanded by Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. Montgomery fielded the British Second Army with 6 armoured, 8 infantry and 2 airborne divisions, and the Canadian First Army with 2 armoured, 3 infantry divisions and 1 armoured brigade. 12th Army Group was commanded by General Omar Bradley. Bradley had 1st Army with 2 armoured and 2 infantry divisions. 3rd Army with 1 armoured and 7 infantry divisions. And 9th Army, also with 1 armoured and 7 infantry divisions. The 6th Army Group had come up from southern France and was commanded by General Jacob L. Devers. Devers had the 7th United States Army with 1 armoured, 5 infantry and 1 airborne division, and 1st French Army with 3 armoured divisions, 1 motorised division, 1 mountain and 3 infantry divisions. While the Allied advance was halted by the German victory at Arnhem and by continued supply problems, the Wehrmacht in the West set feverishly about reinforcing its defences. The generally poor quality of replacement manpower was still a serious weakness, although 1 high-caliber formation was created in September. The 30,000-strong 1st Parachute Army was formed from a corps of 6 Luftwaffe parachute regiments and would acquit itself well in the coming battles. With the defending army groups down to barely more than 100 tanks, panzer reinforcements were desperately needed. Although during September, nearly 500 heavy tanks and tank destroyers were sent west in 10 new brigades, their inexperience would count against them. Meanwhile, there were plans to raise a new panzer army, the 6th, which would be available for offensive operations. But as yet, there were too few new tanks available.